Hey there friends, it's Laurie. Let's make some Christmas DIYs. Getting started, I'm using one of the children's totes from the Dollar Tree and I'm removing the flower and the handles. I'm painting mine white and I'm using some of my white acrylic paint, but if you have some spray paint, that would work great too. Now that it's dry, on one side, I'm using my scissors and I'm cutting in the center about 3/4 of the way up. To make the bottom skirt base, I'm using one of the round red Dollar Tree placemats. I removed the tag, folded it in half, and then secured it together with some hot glue. I then added some hot glue to one side and then folded it in half so that it kind of looks like a slice of watermelon. I'm attaching the two together by placing the pointed end into the elf's shirt. And then I hot glued them together. I pulled the other side tightly against the skirt, overlapped it, and then attached it onto the other side. I then turned it over, added some hot glue to the top of the skirt, and attached the two pieces together. I'm making a tutu for my elf and I'm using some of the red, white, and green tulle from the Dollar Tree. And my green tulle actually has a texture to it, but that's completely optional. I'm cutting all three colors at 14 inches, 7 in red, 7 in white, and 8 in green. My green tulle has a pattern and honestly, I'm just using it because I already had it on hand, but you can use regular green tulle and that will work just fine. I'm attaching the tulle onto a red Dollar Tree chenille stem, but you can use any color at all. I have all my tulle cut and I'm starting with red, but you can start with any color, it doesn't matter. I'm folding it in half and making sure that the two ends match up. You now have a little hole on the top and I'm placing my tulle behind the chenille stem and slipping the two ends through the loop and pulling it tightly against the chenille stem. I'm now adding on the white tulle and I'm following the exact same instructions. And to finish up, I then added on my green tulle, folding it in half and matching up the ends, and then placing the loop behind the chenille stem and tucking the two ends through it. I continued on following the same pattern of the red, white, and green until the tutu was complete. The reason I cut 8 pieces of green tulle instead of the 7 was so that I could have one on each end of the tutu. Now that I'm done, I'm attaching it above the skirt. I'm finding its placement and then wrapping the two chenille stems around the sides. I'm turning it over and using my hot glue gun, I'm attaching the chenille stems to the back, which actually is the front of the elf. I then turned it over, lifted the tulle, and added some hot glue to attach it to the front, which is actually the back of the elf. I'm making some hair for my elf and I'm using one of the white hand towels from the Dollar Tree. Once I remove the hanger tags, I'm folding it in half from top to bottom. And now using my scissors, I'm cutting it along the fold. I now have 2 pieces, but I'm only going to be working with one. I'm folding this piece in half, side to side, and then cutting on the fold. Now that I have 2 pieces, each side has a finished edge, so I'm cutting those off as well. While you're cutting the towel, don't worry if your lines aren't perfect because once we make the hair, you'll never even notice. Now with my 2 pieces, I'm going to fold them lengthwise into 3 even pieces. And then using my scissors, I'm going to cut on the fold so I have 3 independent pieces of towel. Here are my 3 strips of towel and you can see they are definitely not perfect. I folded my second towel in thirds, cut along the folds, and now I have 6 individual pieces. To dye my elf's hair, I'm using some of this Dollar Tree instant coffee and about 1.5 cups of hot water. I added in 2 tablespoons and mixed it all together. I'm now adding in all 6 strips of fabric, and then I'm just using my spoon to make sure that they're evenly coated. I then let the fabric set in the coffee water for about an hour. After an hour, I wrung out each piece, placed them on a foil-lined cookie sheet, and baked them in my oven at 250 degrees for 30 minutes. They're now this pretty golden color, and I'm going to use 2 rubber bands to attach them together. I'm making 2 braids, so I gathered up 3 ends of the fabric together and then secured them with a rubber band. With all 3 pieces secured together, I placed my heavy clippers on the end with the rubber band, and then I braided the 3 pieces of fabric. When I was done braiding, I then grabbed each end and gave it a little pull. Then attached that end with another rubber band. I then followed the same instructions for my second braid. When I was done, I then used my scissors and I cut off both ends so they were even and straight. I placed the 2 braids onto the back of my elf and then hot glued them into place. For her hat, I'm using one of these elf hats, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm giving my hat a bit of fullness, so I'm adding in a handful of polyfill. The green accent on this hat is a little too large, so I'm going to fold it under about 1 inch and then attach it in place with my glue gun. I worked my way around, adding on the hot glue and folding the edges under. When I was done, I then glued the little bell accents in place. To add the hat onto my elf, I'm simply sliding it over the top. And then I added on some hot glue to help hold it in place. When I was done, I turned my elf over and I glued down the 2 sides. And you'll see that in the center there is a little bit of extra material. I just kind of folded that over and glued that in place. With my hat in place, I'm folding over the top point with the bell and attaching that as well. I'm making 2 bows for my elf's braids, and I'm using some of this pretty striped Christmas ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I'm making 3 simple bows, 2 for the braids and 1 I'll be adding later on to the hat. I cut the tails off at an angle, and then using my glue gun, I attached 1 to each braid. For her legs, I'm using these 2 elf picks that I picked up at Michael's. They were $4 each. I used a coupon, so they ended up costing me a little over $5. To add them, I placed them both between the placemat skirt and then hot glued them into place. I'm adding an accent to her hat, and I'm using 1 14-inch piece of the white tulle, and all I'm doing is making it into a simple bow. When I'm done, I'm adding on that 3rd bow that matches the braids, and I'm simply hot gluing it to the center of the tulle bow. And now all that's left to do is attach it just above the bell. I used a piece of floral wire and added a hanger onto the back, and now this Christmas elf is ready to hang. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, I'm so happy to see you. I'm making my 'Tis the Season Christmas tree sign by using one of these 8x10 Dollar Tree frames. I'm taking it apart. I'm removing the little tabs that holds it in place, the backing and the paper insert, along with the glass. For my DIY, I'm using 3 acrylic paints, Christmas green, white, and a sage green. I'm painting my frame with my white acrylic paint, but you can choose any color you'd like. I'm putting that aside, and while it dries, I'm going to work on my glass pane. I'm using a paintbrush with a small, thin end, and I'm starting with my Christmas green paint. I'm starting on the side of my glass, making random strokes with the ends turning upwards. As I worked my way up the tree, I continued to make the branches just a bit shorter. As you're adding on the paint, don't be super fussy because we're going to be adding on multiple layers. I'm now adding on the sage green, and I'm following the same instructions. After the green, I came in with my white acrylic paint and a much heavier stroke, and I also followed the same instructions. Now that I have my white added, I'm going to add in the sage green, and all I'm doing is adding some strokes in here and there, and if I see any clear glass, I'm trying to fill those in as well. As I'm adding each layer of paint, they begin to blend in with each other, and it gives my tree a more natural look. For the back of my sign, I'm adding on a piece of translucent paper. Mine has some sparkly accents that remind me of snow, but if you don't have any of this on hand, you can always use a piece of white paper. To attach it to the glass, I'm using a glue stick, and I'm making sure to stay just at the edge of the paper. I'm making sure when I add the glue that it's no wider than the frame. When I'm done, I'm then adding my glass tree onto the paper, making sure that the edges match up perfectly. Once it's in place, I push down around the edges to make sure it's attached. Now that the frame has dried, I'm going to attach the two together using some of my E6000. I added a generous amount on the inside edge of the frame, then placed in my glass tree. I let it set up for about an hour, and I printed out the words "'Tis the Season" on my Cricut. If you don't have a Cricut, you can always use some stickers. I found its placement, added it onto my sign, and then I rummaged through my button jar looking for something I could use as ornaments. I found some green, red, and white buttons, and I arranged them on the tree. I'm happy with their placement, so I'm using my E6000 to attach them. Instead of buttons, you can always add on some Mardi Gras beads. You just cut them into individual pieces and glue them on. As the topper for my tree, I'm making a small bow, and I'm using some of this pretty Christmas ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I'm also adding a second bow as an accent, and I'm using some of this pretty red sheer ribbon, and this came from the Dollar Tree as well. I placed the two ends of the ribbons together and made a simple bow. I cut the tails at an angle, and now using my glue gun, I'm attaching it to the top of the tree onto the frame. This next step is completely optional. I'm using a green colored pencil, and I'm following along the decorative line on the frame. By doing this, it breaks the white up just a bit and leaves a hint of green accent. For the hanger, I'm using a piece of red ribbon, and I cut about an 18-inch piece. To attach it, I added some hot glue onto the back and also some E6000. The hot glue will hold it in place while the E6000 sets up. Now that it's complete, this will make a pretty addition to your holiday home, hanging on a wall or a window. I'm starting this DIY by using one of the wooden cutouts from the Dollar Tree, and I'm giving it a coat of white acrylic paint. I chose white for my star, but I think any of the holiday colors would look great too. For the center accent, I removed the tag, and I'm using one of these gold stars from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to be adding my two stars together, but before I do, I'm going to attach the hanger. Each star has a hole in it, so I'm matching the two up together. For the hanger, I'm using a piece of white ribbon and I'm sliding it through the gold and the white star. And I'm waiting until later to tie them off. I'm attaching the two stars together using my E6000. I turned the gold one over and added the glue to the flat sides of the star. When I was done, I then centered it on the white star. I'm adding on some accents, and I'm using one piece of this wired greenery from the Dollar Tree. I folded it into thirds and snipped off the folded ends. I added some hot glue to the center of the gold star and then attached the little bunch. I'm using one of the flower stems from this Dollar Tree holly, and it comes with 3 leaves and some red berries. I snipped off one bunch and hot glued it to the center of the greenery. I want to give the holly a bit of a snowy effect, so I'm using my white acrylic paint, and with my paintbrush, I'm adding a light coat of paint around the outside edges of the leaves. I'm now adding on some additional accents, and I'm using 2 of these small pine cones. They actually came in a package from the Dollar Tree. I used my glue gun and attached one on the side and one on the top. For the accent bow, I'm using this pretty Christmas ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And I'm also using a piece of floral wire. I only need a half piece of floral wire, so I just folded it in half and cut it. To make the bow, I gave myself about a 3-inch tail and a 3-inch loop. I then twisted the ribbon and made myself another 3-inch loop. Then I secured the bow together with my floral wire. I placed it over the center of the bow, pulled tightly, and twisted it together. I then cut the ribbon, giving both tails an angled end. I added some hot glue to the side of the holly and then attached my bow. For my final accent, I'm using the red and the gold berry garland from the Dollar Tree. I cut 4 pieces at about 4 inches in length. I then randomly added them around the center of the star. When I was happy with their placement, I then used my hot glue gun to secure them. To finish up, I tied a little knot in the hanger. And with that, this Christmas star is ready for the holidays. To make the candy cane tree, I'm using about a half a roll of this red and white clothesline that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. For my tree, I'm using one of these 8-inch styrofoam cones, and I found this at Walmart. You can use the cones that they sell at Dollar Tree, but the top of them are flat, so I would suggest if you use it, just kind of cut away the sides so you turn it into a point. Wrapping the tree is super easy. All I did was add a dot of hot glue at the bottom, and then I started the clothesline. With my first piece attached, I'm making sure that I'm using my finger protector because you're going to get up close and personal with this hot glue, but I'm just adding hot glue and I'm attaching the clothesline, working my way around the bottom. I have my tree sitting on a piece of waxed paper, and I did this because just in case when I was starting the glue dripped, it wouldn't attach it to the brown paper underneath. As I'm adding on the hot glue, I'm attaching the clothesline and I'm trying to keep it as closely together as possible. When I found this clothesline at the Dollar Tree, it reminded me of candy canes, but they also have some green and white, which would make really cute trees, along with some blue and white. I'm making this candy cane Christmas tree to go along with my Dollar Tree gingerbread house, and I'll have that video linked below in case you'd like to check it out and possibly make one for yourself. This is the easiest project ever, and all I'm doing is continuing adding the hot glue and wrapping the clothesline around my tree. To finish off the top, I add on some hot glue and I continue wrapping it around into a point. I cut off the clothesline and then hot glued the end down, and there's plenty of this clothesline to make at least 2 or 3 of these trees. Now that I'm done, I'm going to add a star on the top of my tree, and I'm using one of these wooden stars from the Dollar Tree. I'm keeping mine very simple, and I'm painting it with some white acrylic paint. And while I was painting it, I did make sure to paint it on both sides. With my star dry, I'm adding it onto the top of the tree by simply placing on a dot of hot glue. For the base or the trunk on my tree, I'm using a cap from a bottle of orange juice. I'm painting mine brown, and I'm using some of the Dollar Tree acrylic paint. When it's dry and I kind of think it looks like a cookie, I just placed some hot glue on the top and then centered my tree. Now that it's complete, this candy cane tree is the perfect complement to my gingerbread house. Well, here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you enjoyed making these Christmas DIY crafts with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. If you'd like to make this gingerbread house or some other Christmas DIYs, I have a whole bunch of them linked below in my description. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody.